If your eyes are closed, you can't see. When you open your eyes, you see what's around you. When your mind is closed, you can't experience. When you open your mind, you experience all that's around you.
Do you ever wonder what happens to you when you die? Or about yogic powers or psychic phenomena? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Quantumplations, a place where we cover all the burning questions of the Omniverse. Join hosts Guru Singh and Mike Clark in a deep exploration of the solutions that are available to us in every moment. Let's get into this.
I wasn't thinking about age at all. And I think I might have mentioned this to you. We had this couple in need coming from a country location, out in the country. And they needed big city doctors. And so they came and stayed with us for 6 weeks. And we've known them for nearly 50 years, this couple. And he is a couple of years older, she's a couple of years younger. But they had aged normally, right? The way people normally age. Not like my wife and I. And it was a shock to me, if I can say such a word in this instance, as to what normal is and what people expect out of a particular number, right? And so that it really changed the way I've been approaching each moment. And it reminded me deeply of back in the early 80s. I was made acquaintances with Quincy Jones. And Quincy was a phenomenal jazz musician, and that's what he was. Until his second or third brain surgery. Because each time he went into brain surgery, he was asked to sign a disclosure that said that no one in my family, if I die on the operating table, nobody in my family will hold the doctors and the hospital and everybody else responsible, that it's a high-risk operation, and I have to acknowledge that. And he said he was either the second or third time that he had to sign that away because the situation that was taking place in his brain, it was non-cancerous, but it was a tumor, and came back, and he had to go in again, and I think even a third time. But he said after that third time of signing this, he had a wake-up call that he had to make everything and every moment count. And from that moment on, he became a music executive. He developed record labels. He went into production. He developed a production company. He went into television. He went into film. I mean, from being this jazz musician, he just expanded like a forest. And I say that because having this experience with these people and recognizing and realizing that, okay, if it goes according to plan, I've got 30 years and that's according to plan. But that's still just 30 years. That's not a big deal of time because every year has been going by so fast. And so it's really caused me to focus on get stuff done, Don't let things hang out in the format of I'll get to it. And it's made a big difference.
It's interesting. So I want to maybe challenge that a bit, as I want to do. I feel like when you say get things done, you're using a different context than most people who are kind of goal-seeking, achievement mentality, right? I'll just give you an experience that I had. I met a guy and I asked him what his special talent was. It's a great question to open up with people. I said, what is uniquely interesting about you that I wouldn't find with many others? And it's a tough question. So he thought about it. And he told me something he's never told anyone before because it's a bit odd. He says, I know how to bend time. And I said, okay, tell me more. And he said, well, I've been playing with this thing where I'll have a cup of tea, but when I'm having a cup of tea, I don't give an end to it. I literally am having a cup of tea as if I'll have this cup of tea for the rest of my lifetime. I'm so deeply present with it. And so what happens is the cup of tea might last 40 minutes, but it feels like it's gone on for 4 to 6 hours. And I'll go about my day with a series of these things. And at the end of one day, it feels like a month, right? And we've all had the opposite experience where, especially I live in New York City, you wake up, there's a meeting, and you're going from place to place to place, you're down on your computer, whatever you're doing, and it's Friday. And you're like, where did my week go, right? And so time has just vanished with speed. And so one of the things I've been playing with is this idea of actually changing the frame of reference of time. And I'll get to why the doing. So that was one thing, was just like when you play with deep presence and you have what I call chapter changes. So even here, we're in a podcast and we're going to be deeply present for the next hour or so. And then we're going to go have lunch with your lovely wife. And that will be another chapter. This day will feel as if it was a week long because of our deep presence. Plus we did 2 or 3 things here that had its own chapter to it, right? And I've been thinking about this because there's a very precious thing in my life right now, which is my kids. And I want to extend the time that they are the age of 4 and 8. But there's not a physical way to do it other than being so deeply present that it feels like the days are longer, right? And then I've been thinking about the idea of achievement because I do have this idea of mortality. It's always been here. I'm going to die soon. It'll be over. And so I want to accomplish. But I've been really playing with this thing and of actually allowing things to move through me rather than me directing the things. And so if I look back over a couple months, my accomplishment factor seems to be quite high, but my doing factor is actually getting lower, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't really understand how that challenged what I said.
Well, I wanted to challenge the idea of when you say doing, I think that you're getting it done. I have a feeling that you mean it in a little bit different way than I'll call it the Western, I'm going to tackle this to-do list and grab this and have this goals and I'm going to capture this, etc. So I just wanted to kind of challenge the traditional way of thinking about it because I have a feeling you're thinking about it differently.
There's a word, it's called posterity. And what it means is post, which means after. Terra. It means post terra. It means after you are on the earth. And so when I say get it done, what I'm talking about is making certain that there are seeds that I have left here that are going to be growing after I'm not here. Because our goal is to uplift humanity so that as a full-on effort of humanity, we solve the issues of war. We solve the issues of disease. We solve the issues of emotional challenges such as anxiety and depression and all of those things. And we solve the issues of the mind, right? Not that we need to put implants in our brain. Not that we need to travel to another planet to find the resources to sustain us, but to live in harmony with everything that is in our vicinity so that it's truly sustainable. It's not a propulsion-based circumstance where you burn it and it's done, but that it's like the breath. Think about it. If the breath weren't sustainable, if the whole creation hadn't set up the carbon cycle of the plants feeding the animals and the animals feeding the plants and back and forth continuously, it would be a problem. So what you and I have always prized our goal as is to create this sustainability, this human sustainability that follows the same cycle as the giraffes and the elephants and the lions and the birds and the fish, that it just happens and it keeps going beautifully and it's in tune with everything. So when I say get it done, you're right. It's a different context. And what it means is that I'm focusing on, like what you just said, the time to do what needs to be done before I travel to the next chapter is now, is right here in this moment. And it's interesting because the ideas of, I'll get around to it, no longer take place since this sort of new discovery of, okay, I'm abnormal. That's acceptable. Okay, I'm abnormal, but I have to also recognize that there is a limit to the abnormality. And let's get the seeds planted firmly.
It's interesting. I was thinking about for people who might not be exactly like you. I think you and I share a lot of similarities in the sense of we have a bias towards action. And my wife has a bias towards peacefulness and creating this really beautiful environment of peace with which people like me and others can be in action and not lose their way because there's this peaceful thing. And so it's interesting because each person's going to have their own journey, right? Some are action, some are here to rest, some are here to be peaceful, some are here to scale and have impact, some are here to go one-to-one. Everyone's got a role, right? And tuning into that. But I was thinking about that there's this this gentleman, I think I told you about it, my friend named Shen, who was he was like you and me, a disruptor. So at 19 years old, he was leading Tiananmen Square and he was always disrupting, right? And he told me about something that I hadn't really heard about it this way. It's the 4 stages of consciousness. And the first one is victim consciousness, which is things are happening to me. Mm-hmm. The second stage is the kind of the manifester, I am the creator consciousness of things are happening by me, right? And many of us in Western society, at least, fall into the first 2 categories, right? Oftentimes we're like, I did this and I created this and I built this, and it's very much like an I. And then oftentimes people, this is happening to me. I can't get, all of these things, right? The third stage, which is what I've been really dancing with, is the surrender consciousness, where things are happening through me. And it's like you're being danced, right? You're not the dancer. And so when you talk about getting things done, there's a mission that is pulling you to where it goes. And each day you actually have no idea where you're going because you're surrendered to the mission. And then the fourth one, which I'm not sure if it's in this lifetime or maybe a couple now for me, is the asmi, which looks like by me, but you are. It's the oneness consciousness where there is no through me, there's no separateness, there's no other. But for most of us, I think the most interesting one is to talk about the transition from second to third. This idea of by me and through me. And I think there's a lot of confusion because a lot of people that are in the by me think they're in through me. And the through me looks a lot like an effortless dance because you've surrendered to something greater than yourself and you're no longer in control, which is a very egoic death sort of thing, but so freeing when you get there. And I've glimpsed it and I've been a part of it, but I haven't been able to live there fully. And something I'm working on currently.
Before we started filming, we were mentioning the conditioning around AI. And if you were to take those same four qualities, the AI's goal, as prescribed by those who are most involved in developing it, is to accelerate the by me. Because, in fact, there's nothing that we create outside ourselves that doesn't already exist inside ourselves. And there's nothing that we create that is inside ourselves that's not abundantly available throughout the universe. So we're this little creature and we're thinking about how can I become even more productive? How can I be even more of a doer? How can I be even more of a by me producer? The through me is the key. So that actually lays its cards over the AI and says, greater intelligence, super awareness, like you were saying the other day, superpowers, right? People are very curious about what superpowers do we have? Well, just imagine one, and we have it. I don't mean we have it to use, but we have it available.
Yes.
So if we were to not spend so much effort on trying to externalize our intelligence through the artificial mechanisms, but to maximize our ability to by me channel the total intelligence. That was what Einstein did, Tesla did, all of these Da Vinci did, all of these alchemists, if you will, were becoming larger and larger and larger and larger and larger vessels through which the full-on awareness, the full-on consciousness could flow right through to be a through me person. Explain a little more about you brought up the ASME. Explain a little more about your understanding of the ASME.
To me, the ASME is when there is no separation of yourself from the mission. You are the mission. So I think there's been, for me, glimpses of the through me, where like the mission is pulling me and it's like, it's clear there's a mission and it might be service. It might be my mission. I know our collective mission is to both be a very clean vessel and then also help others to activate their self-authority, their soul's awakening, their soul's purpose, right? And there's a mission and then there's us in service of the mission, right? We're a foot soldier, or if you will, of this great thing. The ASME, the oneness, feels like we are there's no separate, there's no other. The mission and us are exactly living simultaneously. And so there is no other. That one feels slightly comprehensible, but less attainable in at least understanding with words.
So looking at you from the outside, I see you as a by me, through me, as me combination. In that definition. Because there are moments when you are the mission. Whatever the mission is, greening the lands of Costa Rica, developing the mangroves, and you take a step back, and the as me becomes an observation, so then it becomes a through me. And if you take a step back even further, you might become a by me for a few moments, and then your wife Charmaine will correct you a little bit. My wife, when you were describing your wife, and you had just said, you and I are very similar, and then my wife, and I thought, well, he's describing my wife too. So we're very similar. Our wives are very similar, so they're having the same effect on us that each other. And so I see you as this kind of like this flow between it's almost like it's a by me is the starter motor. The through me, it's like a hybrid car, right? The through me is, okay, the starter motor is not going, and now the car is moving, and the alternator is recharging the battery. And then it is as me is when the battery takes over, kind of thing. So it goes back and forth. If you look at that screen on a hybrid car, you can see it shifting depending upon the need for acceleration becomes a by me. Once you can coast with it, it becomes an as me. Once you feel like it's like surfing. Once you feel like you've got it, you've got the wave, you're balanced, then it's an as me. So I actually don't, as me is hard to observe, because the moment you observe it, you're not the as me anymore.
Exactly. That's very funny, because it's like being in that deep sense of meditation where you are the universe. Yes.
Yeah.
But you're right. It does go in, and it's more about holding states for longer. It's it's a little bit, to me, this is a practice. So I'm just continuing to practice. And I think in this game, we were here 9 years ago in this exact room when I started my journey. It started before, but there's a chapter of this journey. And the thing I've noticed is that the more you practice, that's why the daily practice has been so important, the easier it becomes, right? That instead of holding a glimpse of a thing for 1 second every other month, you're holding it for a minute, every other day. And then that minute becomes a little bit more, and then all of a sudden it becomes, kind of regular. Actually, I had this epiphany that I want to talk to you about. I don't think we talked about it in person recently. So I had this understanding, I'd say incorrect currently, that if I devoted myself to my spiritual practices, my meditations, and kind of the 8 limbs of Patanjali, kind of that whole thing, that I would kind of become this great human, more of a well-rounded human. And one of the things I think they call it bypassing of some sort, is I don't think I bothered to dig deeply into the emotional body. And from Kundalini and the different yogic practices and meditation practices, I'm sure you'll get there through many years and it'll arise. But there's been some practices I've been doing that showed me some deep hidden mini traumas or different things inside that I thought were super helpful. And it made me realize that there are some people out there that I've met that have been very spiritually abundant, like powerful. and yet their actions seem to be childish. Or, we've all heard of some of the great yogis that have gone down in scandal. And I wonder if and with your people you've been working with and you've been seeing how the role of emotional work, which is, the kind of the inner child work and the trauma therapy and the different things, how you've seen that kind of work with the yogic lifestyle and what your thoughts are on that.
The idea of going back 2 segments of our conversation, the idea of being able to hold an as me or a by me or a through me for a long enough period of time that it has a more profound effect is encouraged by the acuposture of asana. Holding a yogic pose, or even in the slow movement of a Tai Chi or a Qigong move, but it's a slow, very intentional movement, is similar to the holding posture. This helps to program us to be able to maintain a through me with a knowingness that I could drop back into a by me position and accelerate this thing. But I could also hold the position of through me, and it would reach that same acceleration through a more enjoyable period of time. A less effort-filled period of time.
And maybe just to describe, I want to give some words to through me, because it's like, it can be esoteric. For me, the idea is, I think we've all been in different states where the mind is completely turned off. Mm-hmm. It's no longer in control. You are operating through an energy coming through that is not you. It can happen. In
sports, it's called the zone.
The flow state, exactly. Yeah. The zone. You're no longer thinking. It's like when you're thinking, then you're done.
To fuddle it up.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the best things to learn this in is hand drums. When you're thinking the rhythm, you're blowing it.
Right.
When you're just in the rhythm, it's effortless.
Well, we got this right here. This is a beautiful teacher. So there's a couple techniques. The cool thing for anyone out there that is not feeling that they're particularly musical, I wasn't trained as a musician, but there's something really beautiful about playing music. And if you're not trained in the piano or violin, it can be a little intimidating if you're, past a certain age and you don't have the time. One of the beautiful things is that the gong, you can teach someone within, I'd say, a couple hours. The basic strokes and techniques. It's really not that complicated. What makes someone good, quote unquote, at the gong is their ability to meditate, or I'd say, or be, get to a 0 point. And the 0 point is when you are no longer there. Because when you play the gong and you have a particularly energetically beautiful session and you can feel it in the room, you're attuned to the energy. The strokes are coming through you. You have no idea what stroke is coming next. It's just happening one stroke at a time, each one with intention, and the next one flows. The speed comes. You're not thinking about the speed, how hard you're hitting. It's the pauses. It's all happening. When you play like that, you can play for hours without ever needing a break. You can play for hours. It's effortless because you're circulating energy. And so it's actually quite beautiful because you're essentially recirculating energy throughout. So you can go on for many, many hours without needing anything because you're essentially tunes in, and this thing tunes you in. And so the chi is kind of coming in and out, in and out, in and out, and you're recirculating the energy. And so that's kind of, to me, a beautiful flow state through you sort of example. And so it's also just a pitch for anyone out there that wants to play the gong that you can.
So having gone back to that and now forwarding to your question of a moment ago about the emotional body is a perfect linkage to what you just described. That cycle of being as a player, so to speak, right? Moved by what the tones are creating, which then recycle through the playing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also aware of the people that are in the environment, in the room, if it's a sound bath. Those signals are coming back and being processed through. And so you're actually playing with what the gong is cycling and what the people are receiving and then transmitting back into the equation. And then you're just here. You're just here. And you're being moved, and you're an as me, through me kind of hybrid, right? This is how the emotional body and the physical body and the mental body are coordinated in a healthy child.
Mm-hmm.
Healthy children can play till the sun goes down. And when the lights go out, they're asleep. In the morning, they wake back up. There's a squirrel, 2 squirrels. We have 3 squirrels that are our pets. We feed them, and it's a mama and her 2 children. And they look at them chasing each other around in the trees. Isn't that
Play.
Mm-hmm. A healthy child. So when you talk about inner child work, you're reaching for that healthy child who still exists, even though their expression may not be the surface of your being at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it? Because, some people say, well, I suffered trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one way in which the inner child goes into hiding.
Right. Or develops certain characteristics that were serving them at that point.
It's survival characteristics, right? But I believe that everybody suffers from drama, not trauma, but drama.
Yes.
Which is for example, here's a perfect example of acceptable drama, right? You take an engineer and a doctor and a school teacher from 1645, and you bring them into the world today. The only one that recognizes their job is the teacher. Because nothing has changed in education. Teach them how to read, teach them how to spell, teach them how to do math, teach them the histories, all of those subjects. But everything else has changed. And so we put our children, you don't put your children, we didn't put our children, but the majority of humanity puts their children through drama.
Right.
Every single day they have to go through this time of having to go through this. Doesn't quite fit with my outlook, doesn't quite fit with my desire, routine called education that hasn't changed in hundreds of years. The way we approach everything else in our lives isn't recognizable from 200 years ago.
This is kind of ironic, but you remember the name Horace Mann, right?
Yeah.
So was one of the people that put this structure of education together that actually you could say is really enslaved the children's creativity, put us into a very structured, kind of goal-based outline of then this, then we go to a college, and then we get this job. Very like factory. And it's ironic.
Factory schooling.
Factory schooling. Well, it's ironic that the premier school in New York City is called Horace Mann, and I think it's hilarious. And people are racing to get in, and they've lost the sight of the fact that the person it's named after, the premier Ivy school in New York City, is named after what I'd say would be, a flat earther of schooling.
Yeah. And this educational process, because you bring up flat earth, really started to change when, and become this false structure, when the merchant class determined that we could sail the world because the world was round. We could colonize nations because we were more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And we could extract resources willy-nilly, however we needed, for whatever we needed it for. That changed what do you do in life. From being a bit of an agrarian philosopher, honoring family, taking pride in family, to being an achiever, a doer, a must-be accelerating and expanding. And the whole capital system is based in that. And it's only been around for a few hundred years.
Yep.
And yet it's occupying education. Horace Mann developed it because of factory schooling, so that the families that had come off the nature-filled farms and were now in the very unnatural cities had something for their children to be occupied with when both husband and wife were busy in the factories. And so back to the inner child, there we started to depart from the inner child, because people grew up 1,000 years ago in an agrarian society, in a philosophical. There was time to sit out in the fields under the shade of a tree and contemplate the river passing by, like the Buddha, and come up with these extraordinary sensations. Hence, great books were written, great music was composed, great art was done by a lot more people and a lot larger percentage of the population than is currently looking to be philosophical, artistic, musical.
The word that comes to mind is disconnected. So at some point, us humans decided that we were to rule the world. We were God's chosen one. Right? And therefore, everyone should fall under the fiefdom of humanity, of the humans. And so when we created the cities and the society, and now we're here and we're disconnected. And you said this before, this came up with someone when you start kind of seeing everything as energy and vibration and different things, then you could understand how you could communicate with plants or squirrels and so someone said, how do they come up with that this plant would induce this kind of experience? And how would they know that this, for instance, I was in Costa Rica and the guy had this big toad and it was a variety of bufo, which has a psychoactive substance in it. And when you pop its pore right here. And of course, someone had to lick the toad to begin with, right? But how did the connection of understanding that this tree and what it's actually pretty obvious when you meet people who are of indigenous backgrounds who are spending the time dropped in, because there's communication that's occurring. We are so disconnected because we're on one frequency. And a disconnected frequency. So it looks like it's magic. when it's actually not.
It's logic.
It's pretty obvious, but we're on one station. It's our favorite station, the one where humans are gods. And when we drop into the other stations, it's pretty scary, because then we realize our mortality. We realize that like the squirrel is actually our equal.
Yes.
And that is really not easy to swallow.
And that is the inner child, because the inner child knows that that's not the inner child, but the children know that that squirrel is equal.
Mm-hmm.
There was a sense, and many cultures still maintain this sense. No one had to lick the toad. They just had to talk to the toad to further your everything is in communication.
Yeah.
And the toad, it's a little bit like the Alice in Wonderland story, right?
Mm-hmm.
The rabbit's talking, and and the toad said, I've got something that I've got more than I need to use, and I could share something with you. And if you take it, it's going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
And the indigenous person sitting in conversation with the toad would follow the instructions that the toad gave them.
Mm.
It wasn't just a happen chance. Very much like I think of, okay, we sail in these sailboats. Of course, now many sails are made out of synthetics. Some of the biggest sails are made out of mylar, and they're rolled back into the mast. But I'm talking about, just in general terms, a canvas sail that catches enough wind to move a very large vessel across the ocean, carrying people and stock. Well, just think of all of the time that it took to think, okay, cotton has an interesting fiber. And if you roll it, you can create thread. And once you have a bunch of thread, if you tie a bunch of them this direction, you can weave a bunch of them through this direction by going over and under and over and under and over and under. And then you've got this piece of fabric. And that piece of fabric can not only keep you warm, but if you put it up in the wind and hold it in place properly, you can catch the wind. Mm-hmm. And if you catch enough wind, it can move you across the water. It can even move, they've got these buggies that catch wind, these that then run across salt flats and things. And that same communication from the cotton to the person, and then the cotton says, you could weave me like this, is the way this happened over thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And it's the same way now that we will be able to achieve even greater capacities of motion without propulsion, right? Catching the winds of the cosmos. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I dive so deeply into that is that that's the mind of the child. Mm-hmm. Because the child isn't projecting very much at a child's age, but they're receiving a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And when I watch you, go around, you're doing this and you're doing that. And when people watch me, I'm sure it has the same impact. But I see a child. Mm. And I see, when you're working with your children, a child working with children. And that's the beauty. That's what people have to get back to.
The wonder.
The coordination between their physical body, their emotional body, even the emotional body that's been traumatized. For example, just take a real world example. My wife, as you well know, of course, broke her arms, weeks ago, broke both arms. And it wasn't because of bone loss or anything else. It was because she was doing something in the garden and, a hose or a rake handle or something jumps in the way and she trips over it and lands on both wrists and breaks them both. And then I've watched her just childlike heal these arms at double the rate that the medical world thought could be healed. But it wasn't like she took a bunch of this and a bunch of that and she was injected by this and injected by that and blah, blah. No, it was her childlike innocence that allowed the emotional body to support the physical body instead of, oh, heck, or oh, other words, why did this happen to me?
Yeah.
Let me figure out the reason why and blah, 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 blah. No, she just took it on, let it be, and it healed miraculously rapidly. So people that are, in going back to your question of, there's emotional processing that also needs to be captured. Yes, because the way Kundalini was developed, it was very blind to the emotional body.
Right.
Not developed. That's a misspoke.
Discovered?
No. Proliferated, promoted from, say, the late 60s through the 70s,
Sure.
80s, and 90s and such. It wasn't to engage all the bodies simultaneously.
Right.
It was, do this, this is the result. So it was very much the by me.
And very masculine.
Very masculine.
Very masculine. Well, that was the thing I was looking at, was just, there's so much to go into here.
But this is good because you brought it up, and this is a good.
So this, it's kind of a very active meditation. And I realized that when we're really flowing, when you talked about, your wife's healing process, which is the chi, the pranic field is healing her, right? And it's more of a surrender into allowing it to heal, right? Versus this active thing. And so I look at polarity, right? So right now we have this longevity health span thing, and it's cool. It's less interesting to me, but I'm fascinated by it. We've got injectables, we've got stem cells, we've got, synthetics that, all this stuff's happening, right? And what that's doing is actually just mimicking what's happening by itself. And so when we actually get out of the way, these things occur, right? When we fully surrender and we're able to actually be able to harness the chi, and maybe actually with a little bit of direction, focus, it comes right in and heals. It seems like magic, but so are these newfound things. But because they're developed in a more active way, which we kind of understand, they're more valid, right? The same thing with, just using an example, there's a lot of people who are trying to solve some of the carbon issues, and they've got these machines, and they're pretty advanced, and they're sucking carbon out of the air. And, I've had people pitch me on these things, and like, Mike, this is the most amazing thing. We figured out this engineering process and da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, wow, right? Everyone's getting excited. And I said to them, this person, I go, that's a really great engineering feat. I go, I have one that's better. And I said, what do you mean? I go, it's called a tree. I go, it sucks carbon right out of the air, stores it in the ground, and shoots out oxygen. And it's super cheap. Runs on solar. And so, of course, I wasn't actually, it did sound a little provoking, but it was true. The thing is, because we didn't invent the tree, we still don't understand it really. And so there's this, and it's cool. Both are great. There's no superiority here. One is more of a active doing, and one is more of a noticing and receiving. And so there's all of this technology that exists that we've just been living with for so long that we forgot and we just ignored. And we're going over here, and it's just super interesting because as we are kind of progressing, I think that the idea of being able to talk to plants, so it sounds a little crazy to some people. Oh, that plant told me this. It told me that if it took this leaf and this fruit and did it in this way, it would be a salve for this rash that I have.
And it was documented. It actually is called botanical sense.
Right. And we've lost that, right? And so what's happening now we have
stopped using it.
It's dormant. Mm-hmm. And some people have it. I've met a couple people who have lived with plants for 20 years and they speak to plants. But what's interesting is, so with the new technology, there's these sensors, and you've seen them, and they're kind of still nascent, but they basically tune into the frequency of a plant and they convert it into a language, right? So eventually, very soon, we'll be able to speak to animals too, in a universal language, real time. Mm. So your dog, which you've been sensing this language, you'll now actually have a more logical universal language that will be converted based upon their vibration, taken through a machine, and there'll be a way of communicating differently. It's already happening. Once we actually have created this computer and this algorithm, etc., it takes away the disbelief, because it's like, oh, this is why this is occurring. But the animal whisperers, people are kind of like, I don't know, that person's a little weird, right? It's so interesting because it takes this doing that I created it in order for the belief to be there, but it's already occurring. We just can't explain it very well.
I had an experience decades ago that allowed me to have full faith in the animal communicators, non-human communicators. We had this mother cat and her 2 kittens, and we kept 2 of the kittens and gave the other 3 away. And so these 3 cats were growing up in our household. And one day, Crystal, the female calico, not the mother but the daughter, didn't come home for dinner. Didn't come home the next morning for breakfast. Didn't come home for like 10 days. And we thought, and we were looking, calling, looking. And then somebody said, call Ted. I said, who's Ted? Ted's an... And I thought, what does he come here and walk around our neighborhood? No. You call him on the phone. He lives up in the mountains. And you call him on the phone and he'll help you. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, because I'm very much a believer, as you well know, and I thought to myself, right. So, didn't have anything to lose except what, $85 or whatever it was. So I called Ted. Uh-huh. And Ted said, okay, because he said, describe your cat. And I described the cat. He said, okay. He said, let me find her. And now if she shows me her body, she's dead. She's passed away. She's passed out of the body because I'm going to be looking through her awareness. And he goes silent and he says, well, I'm looking out through her eyes and she doesn't show me her body, so I know she's still alive. And I'm thinking, right, sure, you know what you know, right? I'm still not a believer. And he said, oh, she was lying down, but now I'm walking because the view is changing. And he started describing the view and, like the flowers and the grass and the cars and the buildings, I go, okay, all right. And he keeps talking and he keeps describing. I said, hold on. This is like 5 minutes into it. I said, hold on. that sounds like our front porch. He said, well, open the door. And I opened the door, and there was Crystal. He told me, he said, when I nudged her and got in with her, right? When I nudged her and got in with her, she realized she hadn't been home in a few days. And she better get home. What had happened, he said, was that she had gone for a walk and somebody had given her a snack. And she ate the snack, and then they thought, oh, well, maybe we should give her more of a snack. And that one snack led to a meal, led to the people kind of adopting her, thinking she might have been a stray. And she just hung out and didn't, time passed and didn't realize it. But this is the skill that they say now they're going to create a machine that's outside of us. But we all have that ability inside of us. If we could just get out of the economic need for 8, 10, 12 hours every day and start practicing this person knows this and start believing in each other like little children do, the inner child again, the emotions become more friendly.
Well, by the way, I just want to reflect that this probably isn't a phenomenon that happens to everyone, which is believers who still don't believe, or
like me,
I'd say, and like me, or even when I believe something and it happens and I'm still amazed. I'm like, even though I know these things are all possible, when it happens, I'm like, I can't believe it. Yeah. And so I just think it's funny that I'm sitting with you.
Because of drama.
But I'm sitting with you, who's had a near-death experience. Who
take away the N.
Who had a death experience.
Yeah.
On the other side, in your book, Buried Treasures, it goes into the marvelous, wild, crazy story that unfolded. That is unbelievable. Right. And so there is many lives. The megaverse and multiverse and spirit and all of these things. And yet still it's hard to believe that Ted can do what he does.
Exactly.
Right. And so this is like just one of these funny things. I'm never going to stop ceasing to be amazed, which I actually love because I love being amazed.
Which is childlike.
And so at least we have at least you called Ted, right? So, because you don't also want to be taken advantage of, because there are people that just make things up. But it is always amazing, because when you stop being amazed, life's not that fun.
And you know what that word comes from? The prefix means without, and maze is that place that you get lost in. So without that place you get lost in. So amazing means that you suddenly found yourself. You suddenly found Ted.
Right.
And Ted was real. And you're amazed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The practitioners that you're talking about that sort of like added layers upon layers to the healthy unveiling.
Yep.
Are the ways of the way. You used an expression a moment ago, to get out of the way, or get into the way of the way.
So remind me of one of my favorite quotes of you that you give to me before I give a speech. The words shall form on my lips. Right? Can you repeat that quote? Just because I love it so much, and I think there's some going back to the through me. Yeah. And also, I'm going to make this practical for the audience, because this is such a life hack.
So it's the words, according to history, not having had a recorder at the moment Buddha was alive.
Sure.
It's the words that are attributed to the Buddha. And that is, the places I am to go, I shall go.
Mm.
The people I am to meet, I shall meet. The words I am to say will form on my lips as I speak. And that which I am to accomplish is already done.
Let's just let that kind of sink in for a second. So practically, I'm going to bring home some practicality. One of the things that if I was looking at efficiency and our lack of time on this earth, it feels pretty fleeting. I've been spending a lot of time on cultivating my ability to hold presence, deep presence, which is a lifelong practice. And it is a practice.
As per your grandfather.
Exactly. I'll get to that in a second.
Bless you. Bless you. I was born into a unique household. My great aunt had discovered Sri Yukteswar at his ashram in Calcutta in 1916. And she began to study with him alongside Paramahansa Yogananda. And in 1919, when Paramahansa Yogananda was sent to America, she accompanied him. And she served him until his death in 1952. And during all of that time, one of the things that happened was that my family, because she was not only my great aunt and my mother's aunt, but she was also my mother's godmother. And she became the dominant influence on our family long before I was born. And that influence continued after I was born. So I grew up in this strange setting that was steeped in yoga, steeped in mantra, in chanting, in kirtan. So when I found Kundalini Yoga, it just seemed quite natural. I never participated in any of the scandalous portions of the organization. I just did what I did. I was part of the teaching, part of the learning. And my wife and I raised our children within that lifestyle. And then in 2020, when two things happened, a scandal took place or was revealed in the Kundalini world, and COVID hit. My wife and I looked at each other and said, we're not throwing all of this away. There is some true goodness inside of this. And so what we did was we began to dig up all of our past and all of our research and all of our development, and we found the purity of Kundalini and the purity of all of the other lifestyles that we have been introduced to throughout our lives. And we decided that we would form Kundalini University. As always happens, or as often happens in life, the moment we had that inclination, a way of manifesting that inclination came directly into our field. And Brett Larkin, who was a student in my Kundalini teacher training in Seattle at the time, came up to me and said, you know, I have an extremely large YouTube global yoga following. I love what you're teaching. I love how you're teaching it. I've been teaching online for 7 or 8 years. Let's put our efforts together. And so Kundalini University found a home. And we put together 835 pages of manuals, all original. We put together all of our videos that she and I have developed so that we could teach what we know how to teach. She knows how to teach yoga and has taught it for many years. I know how to teach Kundalini and have taught it for many years, and now she is that full partner in this Kundalini University that is here for you. We have put it here so that you can take part in the wisdom and set aside all of the perhaps cultish nature of an organization. Set aside all of that which isn't part of the reality, and join us for centuries upon millennia of teachings that have not only been traditional, but have then been calibrated so they fit into the 21st century. This is what is so important. This is what is essential. Because Kundalini Yoga, Kundalini meditation, the science of Kundalini, teaches us how to live our lives in our highest capacity. Whatever we want to be religiously, it doesn't interfere. Whatever we want to be professionally, it just makes us better. Kundalini is a personal experience. It's not a cult. It's not an organization. It's a personal experience. Your personal awareness awakens so that you can see your way through your life more perfectly, so that you don't have to follow this or follow that. You can just follow your inclination, follow your intuition, follow yourself throughout your life to make the most of the life that you have been gifted. This is what I promise you is available to you. So find where you can see the link and follow that link and join an informational session that is so perfectly set up for you. If you need help in understanding it, you can set up a phone appointment. We have a beginning course, the moment you register, that you use throughout the period coming up to when we actually begin our in-person process online in middle of September. It's an incredible university. We know the class is very large, and so we divide it into smaller sections. You become very cozy and acquainted with your section cohabitants. You have a section leader, a support trainer, who's worked with me for some of them over a decade. And what ends up happening is that you end up feeling very much at home within this Kundalini University, within this 200-hour training. Regardless of whether or not you want to be a teacher in a formal set or just live a more productive and brighter life, this training is something that you will want to investigate, because it's going to give you the capacity to live your life in the most beneficial way. I am so proud of Kundalini University. I am so proud to be able to communicate with you at this time. And I am so looking forward to meeting you and working with you throughout the 6 months of September and October and November and December and January, February and March, so that we can truly have a world filled with more joyful, more awakened, and more meaningful people. Love you. Bless you. Be well.
When you are able to cultivate that, there's no need to practice your speech. You can be prepared for your speech. But I did this the other day. I had to give a kind of a birthday roast. And generally, I might have prepared some thoughts, etc. I had an idea of what I want to do. But what I did at the birthday speech was I tuned in. I just was like, I'm gonna use the Guru Singh's mantra from the Buddha. And so I just tuned in and I just got so deeply present. I wasn't thinking about what I was going to say. Is it going to land? Is it a good joke? Is it a bad joke? And what you realize is it almost doesn't matter what you say, because you'll be able to figure out what comes next as it comes. And so the attunement to the room is actually the most important, because the words are irrelevant. Most people forget the words you say. It's not meant to be in some speech that's put on a wall. What people remember is the feeling they had when they were with you. And that is only cultivated through the attunement to the energy in the room. And so this has been a new thing for me, because I used to give lectures and speeches and I thought they were pretty good. I was, a decent, eloquent wordsmith. What I'm now seeing is when they can get to the point where people go, wow. And that is when I stop practicing, stop writing, and I completely tune in to the room. And I have no idea what's going to come out. I might have an idea that I'm really feeling that this subject wants to kind of come out today, but it is coming out as I'm speaking, because I'm deeply tuning into that person and feeling that person's energy. And it's this weave of this we're all speaking. It's not me speaking at them. It's us having a conversation with the words coming through me as the primary vehicle this time.
It's an as moment, not a through, but an as. The asness of oneness.
If you can get there. And that's what I've seen you do. And that's why I think people who have cultivated this, you'll see something that's interesting. Someone's about to give a speech to thousands of people or teach a course in front of people. And it's, there's a pressure to perform, right? You want to deliver for the people for many reasons. And that we talked about how being nervous is actually a great tool for focus and all that. But I've noticed that the people that are truly great, they can literally be doing something a minute before and then just go right into the speech. And it's like, well, how do you do that? Because shouldn't you have been practicing up to that second? It's about tuning right in. And then you're there. And then everything just happens. Does that feel true to you?
Absolutely. And if you stretch that over a period of time, it's actually a state of faith and trust. And that's what the graduation is from the by me to the through me to the as me, is the development of that, not faith and trust in the old way of thinking, because faith and trust are states of being, not object orientation. It's not that you have faith in something, you have faith. The trust in something is more of an accountability. That's a different structure. But the faith and trust are things that you practice within yourself. So the faith that, first of all, you're going to have some determination, right? And the determination is going to get you into some certainty. I got this kind of certainty. I got this. I'm going to nail this speech, right? And those are the trainer wheels on the end result of balancing. First you're balancing on two wheels, and then pretty soon you're standing on the seat. You're a circus act. You've got so much balance that you can't undo it. And these are the steps. And that's one of the reasons why whatever dramas or traumas we go through, and I don't want to seem nonchalant about the depth of trauma that people experience, but how do you salvage out of those traumatic or even dramatic moments? How can you salvage enough fuel, enough stem cell fuel to create your life anew? And part of it is get angry. Start to encase your anger and make it determination.
Mm-hmm.
Determination oftentimes has to have a competitor. Whether the competition is a direct competition,
right,
or a competition of, I'll show them,
mm-hmm,
right? They didn't believe in me.
Totally.
I'll show them. And those are really healthy conditions.
Powerful energetic forces.
Yes. And then eventually you get to a place of, I don't need to show them.
Correct.
Because right now I'm doing really well and I'm showing myself. And they've forgotten about me. But I haven't forgotten about me, because now I'm doing much better because I had the anger fuel and I got into determination, and then I'm getting into certainty. Now, all of a sudden, now what I have to learn how to give up is my anguish. And that is an emotional training that is essential in a spirit-based practice, in a soul-based practice, to give up those things which literally were your house. They comforted you in an odd sort of way.
I think a lot of people can really relate to that. And there being steps sometimes, because jumping straight from some sort of trauma, drama, whatever the thing is, that everyone encounters, some to a big degree, some to a lesser degree, but everyone's got something from the childhood. And I was thinking about this.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this, like, even a 5-year-old who was not given enough hugs, right? To a 5-year-old, that's a big deal, right? Of course, we, as a 40-year-old or a 60-year-old, like, oh, who cares? Like, but that was developed as a 5-year-old. And then there's horrible things that happen to children, adults. But as we go through that anger, right, bottling it up, and I'll show you, or I must get free. And then it goes to determination, and then it has some result. And then you're just, what you said, left with yourself, because no one was really there in the first place. It was you created a state to get you to the next state. And now you're seeking love and compassion. It's kind of like the natural transition. And self-love is so important before you can love others fully. And then that feels like, on your spiritual journey, where the emotional parts can be done together, right? Where you go and heal that 5-year-old's need for love, right? And I was thinking about this, like, the path unfolding, the spiritual path, then also when you're tuned in and you're able to be in that presence, you go, wow, this thing I haven't dealt with. And that leads you to going to do some of the emotional work that might be, I'll call it, outside of the traditional Kundalini Yoga or traditional Zen Buddhist path, but is totally has been pointed to by the path, if that makes sense.
Total sense. In the moment of dying, everything in your sensorial construct disintegrates. It is like the animation of a CGI film. Suddenly, it's dust. and then it's nothing. And what the realization of that moment is supposed to be is not, I've lost everything. It's supposed to be, I was everything. Because when the moment is disconnected from the three-dimensional observation, because that's all this is just a three-dimensional observation with a lot of insistence that it exists. And the moment that plug is unplugged,
right,
and it doesn't exist anymore, you have a realization. Damn. I woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Well, okay, then now this is okay. And so
have that realization
now.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So I would say I've been through the work, and I'm, as you know, I'm a pretty devout student. I go all in. And
drop the word pretty.
Devout student. One thing I've been feeling glimpses of, which has been really great fuel, momentum for going forward, because it's the never-ending path of discovery, is that in certain moments I've been able to observe the Mike character taking life very seriously. And in those moments, not all moments, because you can ask my wife, I am not able to observe myself having a tantrum in our what seems so serious, right? But what we do is we have this little cute cue when we're getting into a disagreement. We're running a household and emotions, and we're definitely triggers for each other. And so when we're in this sticky moment, we say to each other, at our best, we say, humans are so stupid. And then what it does is it's a little kind of nod to go up here and observe the Mike and Charmaine character having this ridiculous fight about something that God knows what doesn't matter, right? So have the cosmic laugh while we're here. Don't wait until it's over. So, and if I think many of the people will understand what that means, but let's say someone says, I have no idea what you're talking about. How would you explain this, or have someone observe this beautiful way of being now rather than waiting until death?
So if you're trying to describe the optical sense to a blind person, you're going to have to use senses that the blind person has acutely developed. And so you might start with, well, it's a color that sounds like violins. Now, I would say that lavender is a color that sounds like violins. And I would say that orange probably sounds like red color, orange sounds like trombones.
I would say trumpets, yeah, trombones.
And
yeah.
Red sounds like trumpets.
Uh-huh.
And maybe pink, which is a kind of a red, sounds like a French horn because it's kind of a red with a softness to it. And so, because a person that says, I have no idea what you're talking about, is blind, in quotes, to what you're talking about. And so you have to then find a sensation that they are very adept at. And most people that are in doubting modality, which is a safety mechanism, right? Doubt it until it proves that it's okay, right? And that's the way the sympathetic nervous system works, is that just throw up doubt in every moment. And if
wait, can I just I just want to interrupt for a second. I want to tell you an experience I've had at your retreats. Okay. I just want to like hammer this home, the doubt. I'm a full believer. I am connected here. I'm like really have felt the profound experiences of what Kundalini Yoga, meditation, oneness, all this is. When I'm at a retreat, yours, I remember at one point, and we're chanting, a group of everyone, and you're leading me through these chants, I feel, what the hell am I doing here? This is so stupid. Is this person for real? Is this person tricking me? Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm getting swindled. This is all bull. And every time I did this, I went and trained with another group. And it's funny, and I always feel it. And then what I've been able to do now is kind of go, okay, thank you for keeping me safe. I know that this voice doesn't want me to be made a fool of, to be taken advantage of, etc. Are you here to protect me, or are you worried about changing? Mm-hmm. Right? And usually it's because the status quo is pretty good. Otherwise we wouldn't, everything actually is kind of great as is. And so there is a bit of fear about evolving into a state that we actually don't understand. Mm. When things aren't really that bad for many of us, why would we continue to grow if right here and now is not so bad? Mm. So I just wanted to say, I still get these doubts. I still get these negative, is this bullshit kind of, thing when I'm doing something new that clearly has an ability to change where I currently am.
That is our best friend. Because your best friend is going to make darn sure that you're safe. And it's like, let me go do it. And if it's okay for me, then I'll call you and you can come do it too.
Right.
And it's like they're looking out for you. And so the best way to deal with hard, harsh doubt is to adore it, is to embrace it. Yeah. Because the moment you embrace it, then when it goes to check it out, you're there holding on. Uh-huh. So you're checking it out with it. And then pretty soon, it's like a parent. It's going to begin to believe that you can handle this. Uh-huh. But until it knows that you are not trying to push it away, not trying to deny its existence, and also not being completely obedient to it, until you disturb those three modalities, it's going to remain as your best friend, taking care of you throughout your life.
Because I imagine that must happen a lot when you're introducing things to new people. Well, yourself also. But, look, the first time that you get someone to chant or hold poses, and, the idea of actually, embodying an asana and it actually meaning something, it's so far afield from what we know, right, that, it's a lot of doubt is there to keep us in the same position. So you deal with this a lot with people who come to your classes that might doubt,
Guru Singh,
including yourself.
Yeah. The beauty of this is that, and I've been communicating this in classes as of late, and I call it dream doubt. The bigger your dream, the bigger your doubt, because it's the third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal reaction, right? So if you don't want big doubt, if you don't want to have to deal with big doubt, then don't dream big. And keep yourself down below, because you don't want to stand out, be outstanding, right? Because the old saying that the tallest tree will catch the most wind, right? So if you don't grow above the normal level of the forest, you stay down inside, you catch no wind whatsoever. So this is the game. This is the game that is very emotionally engaged. And that is, to what degree are you going to count on yourself being able to navigate doubt?
Right.
Because when you go big, doubt goes big, equally as big. And so if you're strong and you want to go big, then you have to learn to navigate the doubt. And it's not how to overpower the doubt. It's not how to fool the doubt, because the doubt is you. You can't fool you.
Right.
You are you. And so it's about navigating, and navigation is all about angles. How can I appreciate? How can I be grateful for the doubt? And the moment I'm in gratitude of the doubt becomes like the wind in my face, and I'm having to tack against the wind. So it's about an angle.
Well, so let me go back to our thing when we talk about the speeches. I was actually thinking about this. The lesson shouldn't be, don't prepare for anything and just show up and be present. It's probably not the lesson that we're discussing, right?
Right.
You have a speech you give in front of really big crowds or just important people. You just want to, you want it to be impactful because they've, either paid for it or used their time
They
to be
need
there.
the impact.
So doubt in this case would be like Guru Singh, your speech from last time is not good enough. Guru Singh, your material's a little tired, right? So what that doubt does is it causes you to maybe the night before start kind of outlining some new ideas, some new thoughts, because it's propelling energy. Because you're now saying, okay, I'm listening to you. You're actually right. My stuff is a little tired. I'm not saying that's true, but and then all of a sudden that
Probably
doubt is that doubt is propelling new things to come through. And so then as you listen to the doubt, it then subsided because you gave it an audience, and you said, you know what, you're right. I'm going to actually prepare something new. That doubt then became listened to. And then when you went and then brought the presence that you were going to bring, you actually came extra prepared because the doubt said the presence wasn't enough on its own. And you were able to tune into whether that doubt was just squawking or truth. Right. And then of course that's the magic of knowing which one's which.
Yeah, well, all doubt is truth. It's just a matter of what truth is it. And because all doubt is fuel. And the fuel can be used or just blown up, right? You can blow the whole thing up by just lighting the fuel. Or you can put the fuel in a tank and run it through a few mechanical mechanisms and fire it in pistons and run a vehicle with it.
Well, there's two. Let me take two extreme examples. There is the person that is full of doubt. I'll call it the risk manager, who often never launches the thing because there's a never-ending list of things that can go wrong, right? So we know that person. They often do very few things, but they're very safe and they're very calculated, and the few things they do really well.
Really well.
But maybe the cadence could be increased with a little bit more agility. And then there's the person that seems to just shove the doubt down, almost as if it doesn't exist, exudes a confidence level, and just goes for it, right? Now, I've seen that person is unhealthily shoving the doubt down, and things that didn't have to occur, that were very easily knowable, that could have been, because there's enough unknowable things that are going to come around the corner that we have to deal with. But actually, there was knowable things that were pretty obvious to tune into, that we could have tuned into if we had been listening a little bit more, right? And there were things that were never going to happen on the doubter side that weren't really a risk that we tuned into. And so you've got these poles, right? And of course, the person that maybe is doing the thing, avoiding easy mistakes, still is going to encounter the things that we don't know. That balance is kind of what we're trying to ride, so we feel in harmony.
Yeah. You've just given doubt a place at the table in that description and communication. And having a place at the table, it doesn't have to be a complainer, because sometimes doubt is a complainy kind of doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes doubt is just like a damn good advisor.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of being accepting, appreciative. And it's like a child that grows up and's never been heard, never been listened to. You know, they can be kind of cranky as an adult. And if you just start listening to that cranky adult, they'll become your best friend, and they'll stop being cranky when they're around you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's how doubt is. Doubt doesn't have to be doubtful.
Right. It can be a tool. Just like we talked about anger being a tool of energy. I have a friend that he's one of these ultra marathoners, and he was telling me a story. And I've always admired people that just push past the limits of what's possible. And so I was enthralled by his stories of, running in the desert for hundreds of miles. And I said to him, talk to me about your physical body, because, and its breakdown. And he said, I have this relationship with my body where I think he was on an 800 mile over 13-day run. Okay. Some mile, his knees were just swollen to the point of, just not good. So he had a conversation with his body, and he said, I'm going to finish this race. So you're not going to stop me. I know you're trying to protect me because you believe that right now swelling up is going to stop me from continuing. But there's nothing that's going to stop me. So I'd love if we work together, because I totally hear your call for me to stop, and I'm chosen not to. And I'd like to work together to finish this race. And if we do it together, it'll be safer than me fighting against you. So magically, what happened to his knees? Swelling went down, and he finished the race. Now, that was, I actually introduced him to Kundalini Yoga. We did our first Kundalini Yoga session together because I had heard what an extreme, person he was. And that relationship, he already knew the relationship, because that sounds like magic or unbelievable to someone who hasn't had the experience. But it's obviously, we can communicate with our body, right? And they are there, those knees were there as a protector. They were trying to help us, right? And so it was just interesting, like that way that doubt is there to help us, not an enemy, right? It's also not the governor. So it's just an interesting way of reframing how this information comes up and how we work with it.
I think the word that you used is really appropriate. Governor, right? That's how I worked with the scandals around Kundalini, is that the scandals were there for all of us who were involved with Kundalini. And the scandals were there as an opportunity. They weren't there to be the governor of the time going forward. And those who denied that the scandals ever occurred have taken one position. Those who have denied that anything about Kundalini is completely bogus and should be, thrown off the planet, took another position. And then there was this middle group that decided to navigate the fact that you can't have day without night, and night is dark and day is light. And you can't have, greatness without an equal and opposite reaction. And sometimes the most important thing for people who become great is for them to be successfully able to manage their greatness without taking advantage of those that are in worship mode, right? Because those that are in worship mode can be readily taken advantage of. And so you just have to make really darn sure that you don't slip into that position, because it can happen very slowly. First of all, they start doing favors, and then the favors become an expectation. And then the favors need to build because, you know, it's like everything, it's growing, right? And then the expectations, and then when the expectations start to build faster than the favors are building, then you become out of favor, right? And then you sort of lose your way, and you try to become more favorable, and it's like this, please acknowledge me, please acknowledge me. And one of the things that my wife and I found is that this is just the same as all life. This is a microscopic or microcosm of life itself, because you're always doing favors for life. The ultra marathoner is doing the favor of running the 200 miles to feel the sensation of the achievement. And the scandal that arises is the knees are swelling on mile 135. And there's a number of miles to go. And so the conscious human being has a conversation with the swelling, right? The scandal of the physical body, and says, let's negotiate this. I'll take care of you, and I am going to finish this race. And so if you will just work with me, then we'll move forward. And if it's an actual psycho-emotional scandal that was physically scandalous to some, but you're just one who heard about it, right? And so it's psycho-emotional to you, then let's have a conversation.
Right.
And if we do that with every circumstance that arises in our life, whether it's a scandal, whether it's COVID, whether it's, you know, a challenge with your children, or a challenge with your friends, or a challenge in business, or whatever it is, if you just have that same kind of conversation that your friend had with his knees, with his body at large, things can go very successful.
I think that goes back to, you know, the relating, right? It seems like there's a pretty heightened sense in the world right now. A lot of people are not hearing each other, have positions that are intractable. And so,
what a good word.
Intractable. And one of the things that is interesting, and we'll switch to one topic that the transition will be funny. This is going to be like the DJ mixing a song to the next song. So there's a lot of real world intractable issues where it is absolutely my way and there's no other way. Okay. There's not even room for a conversation. And we don't even need to go into, everyone can fill in the blank with whatever the topics are, because there's many of them. I would posit that part of this is a deep emotional connection, something that hasn't been met, whether it's a father, mother need, whatever it is. And the way through is always, I think, the elevated paradox, which you've discussed, which is pick your, really tough conversation of, and we'll just use one that came up, immigration versus non-immigration, and everyone has their different sides and views, so let's forget that. where can we get to up here? Okay, do you love your children? Okay, I love my children. You know, where can we start connecting, right? To realize that there's a bond. And one of the things I was going to talk about is like right now, as we're circling this warring world, scarce resource mentality, one of the things that I think is interesting about an elevated paradox that could actually bring us together is the idea of us discovering non-human intelligence. How's that for a transition? The idea that we are all one species and one group, and that there are other intelligent life forms out there. I would say that other versions of elevated paradox would be the idea of reincarnation and souls, the idea of that we're all part of one source. Mm-hmm. So that's the highest level, because that's like, you know, the connecting part. I'm just curious, like, if you were thinking about elevated paradoxes of how, if you could wave a wand and have a belief system that we all agreed to, which ones would they be? Would it be that we are one? Would it be that there are other human intelligence out there?
Mine would be the thread that ties those beads together. Infinity is a hidden obvious, which is a polarity, right? It's a hidden obvious. So let's say that the cosmos, I don't want to call it the universe because the universe is a limited portion of the cosmos. Let's say that the cosmos is not infinite. Okay, so it ends. What's on the other side of the end? More of something. So then the end isn't the end. Mm-hmm. So when you use that as the very sort of like card up the sleeve ace, you know, to add to the deck, you win the hand. Everybody agrees this place is infinity and time is eternity. So then that dials me back to the non-human intelligence, you know, the blah, blah, blah. I would take away the N word and I would put in the O word, other human intelligence.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yeah. Because maybe they call themselves human.
Right.
And who would we be to be so bold as to say that's not, we already own that brand.
Uh-huh.
We have it copyrighted.
Also that if let's just say that the NHI, because that's the term people are using now instead of aliens because it's more acceptable. But let's assume that
politically correct,
right? Instead of UFOs or UAPs. So actually, what if the non-human intelligence was actually just us from the future? Right. So that would still be human intelligence, just us 5,000 years in the future, actually coming and visiting current us.
Which is what, and I don't want to jump on this because I want to get back to one point, but this is actually what our soul does, because our soul body, it's a fluid body. It's not a stationary body. It's not like we own a soul body, right? Soul body is a fluid system like electricity. It's running through us, right? However, we've been in those positions. We've forgotten them through our process of the traumas of birth, but we've been in the future and we've come back to the present, you know, and to where do you call it present and where do you call it future? To them, we're living in the past.
Yes.
Right? So if we say they're from the future, they're saying these people are
from the past.
From the past.
By the way, and just
cave people.
I wanted to the one thing.
Cave has just changed.
The idea. So I think everyone would agree that we can remember things, and when we remember things, certain cells have synapses and they fire, right? So we're remembering the past, right? Why wouldn't we be able to remember the future?
Well, that's what Bhavishya means. Bhavishya means the history of the future. And the fifth stage of evolution is called the Bhavishyal stage, which are those who are remembering the history of the future, because the future is it's not a location. Mm-hmm. It's a continuum. So my point is that in an infinite, eternal circumstance, it's holographic. You take any part of it, and that part of it equals the whole. That's the definition of a hologram. So if any part of it equals the whole, and it is infinite, then there's no such thing as one planet with life on it. There's countless. There's no such thing as one universe. They're countless. There's no such thing as one megaverse, which is the surface on which universes are formed. Countless. So it's a multiverse, an omniverse, and it is endless, endless, endless. No thing that you can say satisfies a definition or a defining moment in the description of it. So you just have to come back to the point of being, wow. Wow. That's pretty awesome. That's awe-inspiring. A lot of awe in that, right? Mm-hmm. That's amazing, right? That is awe-inspiring, inspiriting, right? Inspiring. All of these words just start to make sense. And it's just a state of, literally a state of the word you used before, a state of amazement. A state, okay, now how do you harness the energy of that amazement so that things are working good in the present moment?
Right.
And that's what Kundalini did for me more than anything else that I worked with. Not that I'm trying to sell a superiority here.
Sure.
I'm just saying in my experience, not in the experience, but in my experience, it gave me the ability to be, what is it? It's like a dumbfounded, it's like an awestruck, but it's a word that's really, really, really powerful. It'll come to us at some point, and still be practical.
Yeah.
Still have a wife, have children, have property, have stuff.
Uh-huh.
And to be able to do that allows me to then say, okay, let's talk about other planetary intelligence. And to what degree have they discovered the effortless travel through the cosmos? Have they learned what Einstein said was the only way to get truly from one end of this universe to the other is to bend the universe and just step across?
Right.
Have they figured out how to do that? Because that's a doable thing.
Uh-huh.
If it's imaginable,
right, it's doable.
It's doable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when the idea of proprietary, like they're coming to hurt us, right? That's a proprietary attitude. That's a sympathetic nervous system doubt that they're friendly. Can you believe 5,000 years in the future that anything could have survived that long if they were not nice?
Right.
Right. Come on. Like they're nice. Because not nice ends quickly.
Right.
And that's why I disagree with my good friend Charles Darwin that his one statement of the survival of the fittest is actually a misspoke. It's the survival of those that fit.
Right.
That's it. Because when we fit together, we don't compete with each other.
We cooperate.
We cooperate.
Yeah, it's survival of cooperation. Because if we, again, it's a time scale, right? So if we humans proliferate and then essentially overrun the earth, we will destroy ourselves because we did not cooperate with the trees, the plants, the animals, the water systems, everything else that's sustaining us. So yeah, it's we might survive in a short period of time.
And so consequently, the externalizers are going, we need another planet.
Uh-huh.
The externalizers are saying Mars has resources that could be mined and we could use here.
It's not unlike leaving a marriage when there's a problem. Now, sometimes there's a reason. I don't want to discount that, but
yeah, no. Sometimes
there's a total reason, and it's a great idea.
Get out.
It's a great idea.
Get out.
But sometimes, or a relationship with a parent, where I've seen this, where you're estranged, and sometimes there's a reason, and it's absolutely valid. But sometimes you're just going to go to the next place with the same set of problems and start over again.
What is it saying? No matter where you go,
there you are. And they say the grass is greener where you water it, right? So I think this is like a good time to kind of bring to a close. And let's say, what's been bringing you the most joy lately?
Teaching. When I feel and tune in through, because I used to teach in person, and now I teach all over the world. And there's three things that are grappling for me. There's three things that will answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
And those three things are teaching through the eye of the camera to people I've never met, never spoken to in person, but I can feel in my presence. That's a new experience, because feeling people in the room was big. It's like when I was on stage as a singer and a musician. You feel a crowd.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's visceral. The crowd feels you, you feel them. Everybody's in good exchange. To have that same sensation through the eye of the camera. Now, I also have that same sensation through the eye of the camera when it's not live, but it's going to be recorded and then viewed. I can feel the viewer. Just like I used to be able to see the eyes and the face of the people in the room. That's one thing that brings me joy. Another thing that brings me joy is my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been together for 48 years. And we're discovering more ways and more ridiculous reasons to laugh. And it really got started when we were in lockdown during COVID. And there were no other people interacting with us. And it was just the two of us. And we'd come around the corner, you again. And we'd break up laughing, right? And the third is developing a deeper relationship with our children and our grandchildren. So these three things, and it's all about relationships.
Yeah, all three. Deep relationships.
Yeah. So that's joy.
Mm. I would say I have one less deep one that I found some joy yesterday playing with a friend who is a martial artist. He's a Shaolin, and he does Filipino martial arts. And so he has these, it's called
Sticks?
kali, bamboo sticks. Yeah. Now there's something, there's a pattern left, right, and you're using, your brain coordination. It's a little bit of dancing, but there's something beautiful about two bamboo sticks hitting and the sound they make and the connection. And when you do it in rhythm together. So it's like dancing with a friend with a little bit more warrior spirit.
And your drummers.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a satisfying, and you're doing it and it just feels like play. Mm-hmm. And so I haven't done that in 6 or 7 months, and I got to hear, and I rang him up and I was like, you want to hit sticks? And it was like riding a bike. And so that felt really beautiful to be with another great human doing this. So that was a nice experience. I think going back to the relationship with my wife, I didn't realize how deep you could go. And it just keeps going deeper.
That's why they call it falling.
Because there are points where you want to, you're like, oh, this is boring, or this is, I don't know, and it's tough. And then you keep going. And if you have two people devoted to keep going, that to find a way no matter what.
Oh, that's got to be a phrase that you keep. Two people devoted to keep going.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant phrase.
Well, so that's, we had some challenges last year, some deep challenges, like, foundational challenges. Yeah. And so people have asked us and now we're at the most kind of connected we've ever been. And this is our 18th year. So people have asked, what did you do? And I said, it doesn't really matter. Cause like we did this and we did that. We went to this therapist and we tried this technology and it doesn't really matter. You'll find whatever works for you. The only thing that matters, because sometimes they won't work. One person's really committed, one person's not. That's not going to work. But if you have two people completely committed to seeing this thing through, no matter what it costs, and that you're all in, it will work because the intention is there. And so I don't know what the way is, but it'll unveil itself. Mm-hmm. Because you have two people committed. Hey, I know that we're meant to be together and we got some sticky stuff to get through, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And the other person says, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Now, doesn't mean it's pretty, but a way will unravel. So that I think has been such a hopeful, beautiful thing for me. That's giving me a lot of enjoyment. It's like, I didn't realize that you could fall more and more in love, after so long. And it's just, to have someone that is there for you and that is never going to leave is a feeling of security that is just really hard to describe. And I've only recently gotten it after 17 plus years with our relationship. And so I'm hopeful we have another 50 to 100 years together. We'll see what happens with the health span and lifespan, but that's a beautiful thing. And I think the third thing for me, since I'm just going to mirror you, is the spirit of lifelong learning. It is so fun to learn. And there's a never-ending amount of things to learn. As soon as and the next one leads to the next, and the next, and the next. So Kundalini Yoga was such an opening to learn pranayama and asana and the all the different kind of ways of thinking and chanting and the ways of connecting. And then that led to Qigong. And then the Qigong led to understanding the subtle body. And then the subtle body led to understanding energy. And it goes on forever. It's the infinite game of fun. And if you have the childlike curiosity of learning, wow, it really doesn't ever get boring.
And the brain never stops growing. When we did an MRI experiment meditating, when we came out of the MRI experience, the technicians said, you have surprisingly large brains for people of your age. You actually have brains that are similar to those of people in their early 20s. And, that gave us a big head, pun intended. And, but that's because of what you just described. If you're a meditator, you're in a lifelong relationship with learning, because that's what's happening in meditation, is that you're absorbing information.
And I'd say for you, because I can compliment you, what you and your wife are doing by practicing Kundalini Yoga. And again, all the other modalities are access points. So again, Qigong is a beautiful one.
I do that.
Sitting in Vipassana. So is essentially the way I look at it is you are charging yourself to the infinite energy of the universe. And when your vessel is clear, energy flows through and it essentially is recharging all the cells in a way that when it's blocked and you're not connected to that source, there's a closed loop energy system, right? That eventually ages and decays at a higher rate. When you open up to channels, it's like all of this beautiful energy coming in and cleaning out and restoring cells. And so that to me is like, it's a recharging station. So if you want the key to longevity or health span, it's about learning the tools that allow you to connect to chi, to pranic force, to allow to come through you and essentially heal cells. That's truly a technology. So that's why when you say Kundalini, It's a technology. It's a technology of figuring out how to actually open up to the infinite abundant energy that is everywhere, allow it to come and heal you and recharge you. And that to me is exciting.
And that was exactly how my wife healed the bones in her 2 wrists in half the time that medical science said it would take. It was because of exactly how you just described it. You know, it's as simple in practical terms. It's as simple as if your eyes are closed, you can't see. When you open your eyes, you see what's around you. When your mind is closed, you can't experience. When you open your mind, you experience all that's around you. And some of what is around you is what you just talked about. Some of what is around us that we can't actually see or hear because it's way too subtle is the life force, the prana, the chi. And it's that good. It's that chi that allows us to either accelerate or decelerate our health orientation, whether it's healing something that has been injured or it's restoring something that has gone through time. Because decades ago, I learned that, you know, the skin cells are gone in a matter of weeks, right? They live for a matter of weeks, and that the muscles live for around 7 years, and the bones and the deep nerve live for about 18 years. But nothing except for a very few cells in the center of your heart live throughout your life. They're being replaced continuously. So I thought to myself, what is aging? If you're no more than 18 years old, for the most part, what is aging? Well, aging is the story that gets passed from one cell to another as it's leaving. It's either, I'm tired as hell, I can't believe this place, you know, which is some people's stories, right? As particularly when they get into their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yep.
I'm just tired as hell, you know, doesn't work anymore. And so I am...
You're now imprinting the new cells with this story, and then it's getting worse.
Yeah. And that compounds. That can get, it's like...
Because the next cell's got... And then it's telling a worse story.
And then it's going to get worse.
Yeah, it's a bad game of telephone.
I was just thinking of that same thing. And so my attitude is that tell a good story.
Yeah.
And the way I tell a good story in the morning is that I lift weights, I do yoga, I do posture, I do meditation, I do silence, I do chanting. This is what makes up my physiological story.
And you're also
cells in my body.
One thing you do that I think I've co-opted is you talk to your body. So you give thanks and praise to parts of your body, your fingers, your toes, your ankles, your knees. You put attention on it and give gratitude and actually, you know, connect with that part. So that's actually a pretty amazing, it's actually channeling energy to a part of your body. And if there's a part that's probably ailing a little bit, it's a little creaky knee, you bring some extra love and focus it on that. Yeah. And that's the self-healing. You know, of course, it's not, you still need Western medicine, of course, for different things, but this is like the maintenance of aging that you're talking about. I mean, I don't know if it was you or someone else that told me about this woman, because I was in this yoga class, and at the expense of being annoying, there was a woman next to me, and she was maybe 50 seemed very good shape. And she was coming down. I was like, oh, how'd you like the class? She goes, my knees are getting older and I just can't really do, a lot of negative talk. She goes, I'm just, my knees are going. I was like, I just said to her, I just came out. I said, can you stop talking to your body like that? And she just said, what? She said, I go, well, I want to share a story with you. I go, there's a woman that I think she's 60, and every year she celebrates her birthday 30 years before. So it's like, I think when she turned 60, she celebrated her 30th birthday. She had 30th birthday candles. You know, everyone wished her 30th birthday. You know, it was on borderline delusional. But what happened was every year she's been training herself to believe that her body is now 31. And so, but the idea is that like, Mono, my knees are amazing. Now it's not delusion, but it is entrainment. And so negative entrainment can happen too, because if you believe that your knees are going, they will go. Right. And so it's an interesting,
great shift of juxtaposition of wording. It's not delusion, it's entrainment. That is beautiful. You have a lot of good stories. You've had a lot of good experiences. You've met a lot of good people. You have a lot of good stories. And your brain works just like it did. Because what you're doing when you say it's not delusion is that you're prescribing where a person's going to go.
Yeah.
You're kind of saying, no, don't go through that door because it's not delusion. It's entrainment. And you do it with a childlike innocence, and therefore it can't be argued with because it's just a kid talking to me.
Well, and I would say that for you, the proof's in the pudding at 79, your energy is better than, it's not even good for your age. It's just damn good. Right? So anyways, I think we should leave it there.
Good.
And so we have more to talk about next time.
Yeah. Whoa. Will we run out?
Will we run out? Never. Love you.
Love you. And to all of those who dare listen to us, rattle along. We love you too.
We love you too.